You're the best in your field, the best soldiers, tacticians, sappers, communicators, survival experts. I picked you personally because I want you to train the best commandos in the galaxy. You'll have everything you need, whatever you want, except one thing. Home. This is a top-secret project. You'll not tell anyone where you're going, and you'll not leave Kamino. Ever. As far as your friends and family are concerned, you're already dead.
The ocean is vast, unfathomable. How easy it is to be lost in the waves, to disappear completely, without a trace. How much easier so on a world made of ocean, and further, a world lost in an endless galaxy. Like Kamino itself, the Cuy'val Dar were made to disappear from galactic history. These warriors, recruited for their unique talents, set to purpose to forge the ultimate warriors, taught, trained, and unleashed on the galaxy by those who no longer exist.
You are listening to the Star Lores Podcast.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
Are you stuck-up, half-witted, scruffy-looking nerf herder?
But I was going into Tashi Station to pick up some power converters.
Those who no longer exist.
Areen Atma was a human Mandalorian warrior who served among the 75 Mandalorians, recruited by Jango Fett for the Cuy'val Dar training corps. Like his fellow instructors, he spent years on Kamino, helping transform clone cadets into elite soldiers for the Republic's Special Operations Forces. Atma's philosophy of training centered on qualities he believed were fundamental to military excellence: brotherhood, stamina, and loyalty. While marksmanship, courage, and tactical skill were essential, he regarded them as incomplete without the bonds that united soldiers into an effective fighting force. Throughout his years as an instructor, he worked to instill these values in the clones under his command, emphasizing mutual trust and commitment alongside combat proficiency. His approach reflected a recurring theme among the Cuy'val Dar. Many instructors sought not merely to create capable warriors, but to cultivate a sense of identity and shared purpose among soldiers who had been engineered for war. Atma viewed loyalty to one's comrade as a strength every bit as important as battlefield skill. He was pale-skinned with gray eyes and brown hair, worn short, and he maintained a narrow goatee. He typically wore silver Mandalorian armor over a gray jumpsuit and carried a pair of Westar 34 blaster pistols. Like many Mandalorian warriors, he also utilized a Z6 jetpack, allowing him greater mobility in combat.
Kligson was a human soldier and resistance leader from the Outer Rim world of Sukarami, who became one of the few non-Mandalorian members of the Cuy'val Dar, and later one of the Republic military's rare non-clone officers. Raised in a region shaped by constant conflict, Kligson entered military service at a young age through the Grol Sector Defense Force. Rising to the rank of Major, he fought pirates operating in the rimward reaches of the Grol Sector and participated in interventions during the Civil War on Ostega. These experiences established him as a seasoned officer long before the Clone War. In the years preceding the Battle of Naboo, Sucharmi became a focal point of resistance against exploitive Trade Federation policies. When local opposition escalated into a full-scale Federation invasion, Kligson emerged as one of the leaders of the planetary resistance movement. Following the liberation of Sucharmi, He joined the Grol Liberation Front and conducted sabotage operations against Trade Federation targets throughout the sector, further expanding his reputation as an unconventional fighter and strategist. At some point thereafter, Kligson came to the attention of Jango Fett, who recruited him into the Cuy'val Dar. Although he helped train clone commandos and ARC troopers on Kamino, Kligson found life as an instructor unsatisfying compared to active military service. Eager to return to combat, he eventually enlisted directly in the Grand Army of the Republic. As one of the Army's comparatively rare non-clone officers, Kligson distinguished himself in frontline operations, including campaigns on Sluis Van and Prestelin. Unlike many veterans of the Clone Wars, he survived the conflict and remained in service after the Republic's transformation into the Galactic Empire, continuing alongside the troops he had once trained and commanded. He ultimately attained the rank of captain within the Imperial military. Kligson's career made him unusual among the Cuy'val Dar. While many instructors returned to civilian life or pursued personal causes after Geonosis, he remained a professional soldier throughout the remainder of the war and into the Imperial era.
Cort Davin was a member of the Cuy'val Dar who devoted much of his career to preserving and transmitting Mandalorian martial traditions through military training. Like the other instructors recruited for Kamino's secret cloning project, Davin helped prepare the Republic's clone soldiers for the conflicts that lay ahead. His influence, however, extended beyond tactical instruction. He placed particular importance on maintaining the cultural traditions of Mandalorian warriors, especially the battle chant Dalwarda Verda, which he taught to the clone troopers under his supervision. Davin's commitment to these traditions continued long after the fall of the Republic. He later served as an instructor for the Imperial Center Guard, carrying many of the same teachings into the military institutions of the Galactic Empire. Through both Republic and Imperial service, he ensured that elements of Mandalorian warrior culture survived among generations of soldiers who otherwise had little connection to Mandalore itself. In 2 ABY, Davin was interviewed by Eshil Shaiwa of Imperial Center Today regarding Dalwarda Verda and the ancient epic from which the song originated. During the interview, he explained that although the tale centered on the victories of the Tong over the human Gel nations, its themes transcend species and historical circumstance. In his view, the epic's celebration of courage, perseverance, and martial excellence allowed it to resonate with warriors regardless of their origins. Davin's career reflected a role shared by many members of the Cuy'val Dar, preserving knowledge from the past while passing it on to future generations. Whether training clone troopers on Kamino or Imperial Guards decades later, he remained committed to ensuring that Mandalorian traditions endured through those who carried weapons in service to causes greater than themselves.
Cort Davin was a native of Concord Dawn and a former member of the Journeyman Protectors, the respected law enforcement corps responsible for maintaining order on the world. His service gave him extensive experience in special operations and the practical realities of policing frontier space. By 30 BBY, however, Davin had left that life behind and answered Jango Fett's call to join the secret training cadre on Kamino. Like every member of the Cuy'val Dar, Davin disappeared from the known galaxy and devoted nearly a decade to preparing clone commandos for war. When the Clone Wars erupted, he remained involved in the Republic's training programs, helping instruct new generations of advanced recon commandos and clone commanders as part of Alpha 17's enhanced curriculum. Among Davin's most notable students was Clone Commander CC-1138, better known as Bacara. Rather than teaching battlefield skills alone, Davin passed on the traditions and values of the Journeyman Protectors, encouraging Bacara to see himself as a guardian of law and order. He also instructed the commander in the Concordian dialect of Mandoa. Bacara proved to be one of Davin's most successful pupils, reflecting the broader influence that many Cuy'val Dar instructors exerted over the identities of the clones under their care.
Another respected trainer was the Mandalorian huntress and mercenary, Vhonte Tervho. Before joining the Cuy'val Dar, Tervho had built a reputation as a capable soldier, hunter, and gunfighter. Her skills attracted the attention of Jango Fett, who selected her as one of the 75 Mandalorians within the 100-member training corps. For nearly 10 years, Tervho oversaw a company of 104 clone cadets, guiding them from childhood into elite commandos. She also participated in the training of Fett's son, Boba, alongside several other Mandalorian instructors. Like the rest of the Cuy'val Dar, she remained confined to Kamino throughout the army's development, unable to leave the planet until the outbreak of the Clone Wars and the army's deployment at Geonosis. With her contract fulfilled, Tervho returned to Mandalore, but her connection to the clone program did not end there. As the war intensified, she was called upon once again to train Republic troops. Drawing upon her expertise with paired blaster pistols, she instructed more than 1,000 clone commanders in the use of dual DC-17 sidearms, ensuring that her specialized knowledge spread far beyond the commandos she had originally trained. Tervho embodied many of the qualities common among the Mandalorian members of the Cuy'val Dar. She lived according to the principles of the Resalnari, valued personal honor over recognition, and maintained close ties to fellow Mandalorians, such as Kal Skirata. Though she never became a prominent as figures like Skirata or Walon Vau, her influence endured through the generations of clone officers and commandos who carried her lessons into battle.
Kal Skirata, born Falon Matrin, was a human Mandalorian soldier, instructor, and clan leader, whose influence extended far beyond the battlefields of the Clone Wars. Known affectionately by many clone troop commandos as Kal Bur, Mandoa for Papa Kal, he became one of the most important parental figures in the lives of numerous clones, helping shape not only their combat abilities but also their identities. Skirata's life began in hardship. Orphaned at a young age, he was adopted by Munin Skirata, from whom he inherited both his family name and his place within Mandalorian society. As an adult, he married Ilipi Jiro and fathered 3 sons, Tor, Ejat, and Rusan Skirata. Family would remain a central theme throughout his life, influencing many of the decisions for which he later became known. Long before the Clone Wars, Skirata earned a reputation as a skilled and unconventional warrior. By the time Jango Fett assembled the Cuy'val Dar on Kamino, he was already a veteran Mandalorian whose experience made him a natural choice to train the Republic's future commandos. During his years as a training sergeant, Skirata developed a markedly paternal approach toward the clones under his supervision. Rather than treating them as military assets, he regarded them as sons, encouraging individuality and teaching them the values, language, and traditions of Mandalorian culture. The bonds he formed during the period endured long after the outbreak of the Clone Wars. Over time, Skirata came to be viewed as an adoptive father by Omega Squad, the Null-class ARC troopers, and numerous other commandos and clone soldiers. His family eventually expanded even further to include RC-1136 of Omega Squad, Jedi Knight Etain Turamukan, former Jedi Knight Bardan Jusik, and later Venku Skirata, whom he regarded as a grandson. This ever-growing adopted family reflected a defining aspect of Skirata's character. While the Republic and later the Empire largely viewed clones as products of military programming, Skirata saw them as people deserving of freedom, dignity, and a future beyond war. Much of his post-war life would be dedicated to that belief, making him one of the most influential advocates for clone welfare.
Lat Ward was a human Mandalorian mercenary and military instructor who served among the ranks of the Cuy'val Dar during the creation of the Grand Army of the Republic. Selected personally by Jango Fett, Ward was entrusted with helping transform Kamino's clone cadets into elite soldiers capable of serving in the Republic's Special Forces operations. Unlike some of his fellow instructors, Ward's greatest expertise lay not in particular combat specialty, but in his deep study of warfare itself. He devoted much of his life to examining the campaigns of renowned commanders from Mandalorian history, committing to their victories, defeats, and battlefield decisions to memory. As a training sergeant, he drew extensively upon these historical examples, using the experiences of past warriors to teach combat skills, leadership, and tactical thinking to clones under his supervision. In doing so, Ward connected the clone commandos to a military tradition far older than the Republic himself. His lessons emphasized that warfare was not merely a matter of weapons and drills, but of judgment, adaptation, and learning from those who had fought before. Through his instructions, generations of clone soldiers inherited not only practical battlefield knowledge, but an appreciation for the martial heritage that shaped many of their Mandalorian trainers. Ward wore green Mandalorian armor over a gray jumpsuit, accented by yellow shoulder and knee plates. A large mythosaur skull emblazoned across his chest reflected both his Mandalorian identity and his connection to the warrior traditions he spent his life studying and preserving.
Mij Gilamar was a human physician, covert operations specialist, and Mandalorian warrior who served as one of the Cuy'val Dar's most versatile instructors. Equally comfortable in a medical bay or on a battlefield, Gilamar played a significant role in training the Republic's clone commandos and later became one of the central figures in the effort to secure a future for them beyond the Clone Wars. Before joining the Cuy'val Dar, Gilamar fell in love with a Mandalorian woman named Tani. Following their marriage, he embraced Mandalorian culture as his own. The relationship profoundly shaped his life, and when Tani was murdered, Gilamar swore vengeance against her killer. In accordance with Mandalorian tradition, he repainted his armor in sand gold colors that signified a personal mission of revenge. When Jango Fett assembled the Cuy'val Dar, Gilamar brought a rare combination of medical expertise, leadership ability, and combat experience to the organization. On Kamino, he instructed clone troopers in field medicine, first aid, and triage, ensuring that commandos could preserve the lives of their comrades under battlefield conditions. He also emphasized discipline and ideological commitment, helping instill a strong sense of purpose in the soldiers under his care. Gilamar developed particularly close relationships with several clones. Among them was ARC Trooper Alpha 02, known as Spar, who frequently feigned medical complaints simply to spend time talking with him in the infirmary. Their friendship eventually deepened to the point that Gilamar helped facilitate Spar's escape from the Republic military, arranging for Jango Fett to smuggle the clone off Kamino aboard Slave One. Throughout the Clone Wars, Gilamar remained closely associated with Kal Skirata and the growing network of clones, deserters, and allies gathered around Kira on Mandalore. He used his medical knowledge to aid wounded soldiers, including the clone commando Fee, and quietly acquired medical and scientific equipment to support Skirata's efforts. He also became deeply involved in the search for a cure to the clone's accelerated aging, one of the defining causes of his later life. That mission brought Gilamar into contact with numerous scientists, including Dr. Ray Nenelin and the captured separatist geneticist Ovalot Kale Uthan. Working alongside Uthan to solve the aging problem gradually transformed a professional partnership into a personal relationship. After the destruction of her homeworld, Gibad, Gilamar provided emotional support as she struggled with the consequences of Imperial actions. Together, they developed a countermeasure to the FG-36 nanovirus and in the process grew close enough to begin a romantic relationship. Gilamar's compassion extended beyond the clones and scientists under his protection. At Kira, he formed a fatherly bond with the young Jedi Padawan Tal Isabet, Endowung Etzeretse, known as Scout, teaching her medical skills and supporting her desire to remain with the Skirata clan despite her wish to continue following the Jedi path. When Order 66 shattered the Republic, Gilamar joined the rest of Clan Skirata in withdrawing to Mandalore. There, he continued his work alongside Uthan and helped administer the eventual cure for clone-accelerated aging. His commitment to protecting both the clones and Mandalore itself remained unwavering in the early Imperial era. That commitment ultimately brought him into conflict with former comrades. Gilamar had long despised fellow Cuy'val Dar instructors Dred Priest and Isabet Reau, viewing their extremist beliefs as little different from those of Death Watch. He was particularly disgusted by Priest's treatment of clones and his involvement in violent activities on Kamino. The confrontation finally came in Keldabe after Gilamar discovered that Priest and Reau had aligned themselves with Death Watch and were cooperating with Imperial forces. Learning that the organization intended to rebuild under the leadership of Lorca Gedik, Gilamar concluded that Priest represented a threat to Mandalore's future. Luring his former colleague into a private meeting, he attacked and fatally wounded him by exploiting a gap in his armor. With assistance from Cort Skirata, Gilamar disposed of the body in the Cuy'val River, delaying discovery by Priest's death. By the end of the Clone Wars and the rise of the Empire, Mij Gilamar had become far more than a former training sergeant. Physician, warrior, mentor, and protector, he embodied many of the qualities that distinguished the best of the Cuy'val Dar. While others viewed the clones as soldiers created for war, Gilamar devoted much of his life to ensuring that they would have a chance to live beyond it.
Isabet, Reau, often called Issy by her partner Dred Priest, was a human Mandalorian warrior and one of the 75 Mandalorians selected by Jango Fett to serve within the Cuy'val Dar. As a training sergeant on Kamino, she spent nearly a decade preparing clone commandos for service in the Grand Army of the Republic's Special Operations Forces. Unlike many of her fellow instructors, Reau viewed the clone program through a distinctly ideological lens. She believed the teachings, Mandalorian culture, traditions, and methods to thousands of clone soldiers represented an opportunity to restore Mandalorian influence throughout the galaxy. To Reau, the clones were not merely soldiers, but a vehicle through which Mandalorian values could once again achieve prominence. During her years on Kamino, Reau entered into a relationship with fellow instructor Dred Priest. Together, the two secretly organized a fight club, in which clone trainees were forced to engage in increasingly brutal contests. The operation continued until mounting casualties drew the attention of Jango Fett, who personally intervened and violently shut it down by severely injuring Priest. Despite the incident, both instructors remained members of the Cuy'val Dar due to the effectiveness of their training results. Reau's political sympathies increasingly aligned with those of Death Watch, the Mandalorian splinter movement that sought to return to the expansionist glory of ancient Mandalore. Jango Fett himself reportedly suspected that either Reau or Priest may have authored the Bajoran Kirsad Mando'ad and Death Watch manifesto publicly attributed to Tor Vizsla. Following the rise of the Galactic Empire, Reau and Priest openly associated themselves with the resurgent Death Watch movement and cooperated with Imperial forces stationed on Mandalore. Their activities eventually brought them into conflict with former comrades such as Kal Skirata and Mij Gilamar. When Gilamar killed Priest in 18 BBY after learning of Death Watch's renewed ambition, he disposed of the body partly to delay Reau from discovering what had happened. Among those who knew her, Reau had a reputation for uncompromising extremism. Gilamar considered her even more dangerous than Priest, believing she was fully committed to restoring a Mandalorian empire through force. She was known for wearing yellow and gray Mandalorian armor, accented by a yellow kama, a visual reflection of the warrior identity she embraced throughout her life.
Walon Vau was a human-born Mandalorian warrior, mercenary, and Cuy'val Dar instructor, whose reputation for ruthless training methods made him one of the most controversial figures involved in the creation of the clone commandos. Born on the world of Irmenu, Vau was originally heir to the title of Count of Gessel. His aristocratic future came to an abrupt end after a romantic relationship with a princess of a neighboring province drew the ire of the imperious priesthood, resulting in his exile. Forced to abandon his former life, Vau eventually found a new purpose among the Mandalorians, where he forged a reputation as an exceptionally capable soldier and trainer. When Jango Fett assembled the Cuy'val Dar, Vau was selected to help shape the Republic's elite commandos. His philosophy centered on survival above all else. He believed that soldiers needed to experience hardship during training if they were to endure the realities of combat, and he subjected his trainees to some of the harshest instruction on Kamino. The effectiveness of his methods was difficult to dispute. Commandos trained by Vau consistently achieved some of the highest survival rates in actual combat. Yet those same methods also earned him resentment from certain clones, most notably Aten, who never forgave the brutality of his upbringing. Despite his cold demeanor, Vau was not entirely without compassion. He rarely displayed emotions openly and maintained strict professional distance from most people around him, but there were frequent indications that he cared deeply for the soldiers under his command. This concern simply manifested itself as a relentless preparation rather than encouragement. Vau's closest friendship with Kal Skirata, the two men trusted one another deeply despite their vastly different personalities, and their long association endured throughout the Clone Wars and beyond. Perhaps the clearest glimpse beneath Vau's hardened exterior came through his relationship with his beloved Strill, Lord Myrdalan, usually called Myrd. While Vau maintained an utmost unnerving degree of emotional control in nearly every situation, his affection for the animal was unmistakable. The bond revealed a more caring side of a man who otherwise worked tirelessly to conceal his feelings. Jedi such as Etain Tervho and Arligan Zay found Vau particularly unusual because he left remarkably little impressions in the Force. Through disciplined self-control and careful wording, he was capable of masking his intentions even during Jedi scrutiny. This same discipline defined nearly every aspect of his life, making him one of the most enigmatic members of the Cuy'val Dar. Tall, lean, and often described as cadaverous in appearance, Vau was most commonly seen wearing black Mandalorian armor, a stark reflection of the severe image he cultivated throughout his career.
Vhonte Tervho was a human Mandalorian warrior who served among the 75 Mandalorians of the Cuy'val Dar. Like his fellow instructors, he spent years on Kamino training clone commandos for the Republic's growing military machine. Following the outbreak of the Clone Wars, Tervho initially returned to civilian life after fulfilling the terms of his contract. However, as the conflict intensified, Jedi General Arligan Zay requested that several former Cuy'val Dar instructors return to assist in specialized training programs for clone troopers selected for commando cross-training. Tervho was reluctant to accept the assignment, but ultimately agreed alongside Mij Gilamar. His reasons extended beyond military service. Tervho and Gilamar also sought to assist Kal Skirata in investigating troubling developments within the Republic as the war entered its final stages. Like many former Cuy'val Dar members, his loyalty increasingly lay with the clones themselves rather than the institutions that commanded them. In the chaotic aftermath of Order 66, Tervho abandoned the Grand Army and joined Skirata's efforts to extract clones from Imperial control. He eventually departed with liberated soldiers and other members of Skirata's growing clan network, helping provide refuge for those seeking lives beyond military service. Tervho was recognizable by his purple Mandalorian armor and his preference for traditional weaponry. Among the tools he carried were a Bevi Ragir, a Mandalorian hunting spear, and a Besbev, a flute-like weapon that reflected his connection to older Mandalorian traditions.
Rav Bralor was a human Mandalorian warrior, Cuy'val Dar instructor, and one of the most respected maternal figures in the lives of many clone commandos. Personally recruited by Jango Fett, Bralor spent nearly a decade on Kamino training elite clone soldiers, including the commandos of Vivat Squad and Yayak Squad. Like Kal Skirata, she viewed her trainees as far more than military assets and developed strong personal bonds with them over the course of their upbringing. After completing her service with the Cuy'val Dar, Bralor returned to Mandalore. During the Clone Wars, Skirata later entrusted her with preparing Kiramarut, the remote Mandalorian refuge that would become the center for Clan Skirata. When Skirata arrived there with the pregnant Jedi Etain Tervho, approximately 480 days after the first Battle of Geonosis, Bralor had already transformed the location into a functioning sanctuary. Bralor became one of the pillars of the growing community that formed around Kiramarut. Her practical nature, military experience, and fierce loyalty made her indispensable to Skirata's efforts to protect clones, deserters, and allies from both Republic and Imperial authorities. Among the clones she trained, Bralor inspired extraordinary affection. Members of Yayak Squad, in particular, behaved around her much like eager children seeking approval from a parent. The dynamic reflected the deep familial bonds that many Cuy'val Dar instructors forged with their trainees, but few embodied that relationship as naturally as Bralor. Etain Tervho described Bralor as, quote, frighteningly fit, a testament to both her physical conditioning and imposing presence. She possessed little patience for indecisive leadership and held a strong dislike for the Kaminoans, whom she blamed for treating clones as property rather than people. Through her actions, she became one of the strongest advocates for the idea that the clones deserved family, community, and belonging beyond the battlefield.
Dred Priest was a human Mandalorian warrior and Cuy'val Dar instructor whose skill as a trainer was matched by the extremism of his political beliefs. When Jango Fett recruited the 100 members of the Cuy'val Dar, Priest eagerly accepted the opportunity to help create a new generation of elite soldiers. He relished the challenge of shaping commandos and quickly established himself as a demanding instructor. Yet from the beginning, he was viewed with suspicion by several of his fellow Mandalorians. Priest was a committed supporter of Death Watch ideology and believed that Mandalore should reclaim the galactic dominance once enjoyed by its ancient warrior empires. These beliefs put him at odds with Kal Skirata and Walon Vau, who regarded Death Watch's ambitions with contempt. His most notorious activity on Kamino was the creation of a secret battle circle alongside Isabet Reau. Within the organization, clone trainees were forced to engage in brutal combat for the amusement and approval of their instructors. The contests resulted in numerous severe injuries and several deaths. Mij Gilamar, who treated the wounded clones, became one of Priest's fiercest critics and ultimately reported the operation to Jango Fett. Fett responded by personally dismantling the Fight Club and violently confronting Priest, though he allowed him to remain in the training program due to his effectiveness as an instructor. Gilamar later described Priest as a merciless butcher who treated the suffering of his trainees with indifference. Kal Skirata was scarcely more charitable, once remarking that Priest possessed the sort of face a person could punch all day without growing tired of it. Following the rise of the Empire, Priest and Reau openly joined the revived Death Watch movement on Mandalore and worked alongside the local Imperial garrison. In 18 BBY, Priest encountered Gilamar and Ordo Skirata in Kel Dabi and attempted to recruit them to the cause. The conversation confirmed Gilamar's fears that Priest remained committed to rebuilding a Mandalorian empire through violence and authoritarian rule. Determined to prevent Death Watch from gaining further influence, Gilamar attacked him, severing his femoral artery with a knife strike. Priest died from blood loss shortly afterwards. His body was disposed of in the Kalita River by Gilamar and Ordo, both to conceal the killing and to delay discovery by Isabet Reau. Priest's life reflected one of the enduring tensions within Mandalorian society during the Clone Wars era. While many former Cuy'val Dar sought to preserve their culture through family, mentorship, and community, Priest pursued a vision rooted in conquest and imperial restoration. That ideological divide ultimately cost him his life.
Legacy.
Almost 50 years later, the legacy of the Cuy'val Dar resurfaced. In 25 ABY, during the first year of the Yuuzhan Vong War, New Republic intelligence agent and Jedi Knight Cuy'val met with Mandalore Boba Fett on Vorpaya. There, Cuy'val asked Fett to establish a new Cuy'val Dar, composed of experienced Mandalorian commandos who could train planetary militias to resist the Yuuzhan Vong threat. What had begun as a secret cadre preparing a hidden army was now being called upon once again, this time to help defend the galaxy against a very different war. Welcome aboard the Millennial Falcon. This is Christian.
And this is Jordan.
We are once again revisiting the Cuy'val Dar, those who no longer exist. We are on beautiful Mandalore actually today. Just wanted a change of scenery. Enough wakeboarding on Kamino.
I'm doing some excavating for mythosaur.
Can't just pick up a new hobby every time we go somewhere, Jordan.
Hey, come on, it's fun. I'm sure there's some fragments out there waiting to be found if they actually exist, the mythosaur. Because they are a myth, aren't they? No, but before we get into that, let's do some housekeeping here. Of course, if you want to help keep this bucket of bolts flying, the Millennial Falcon, you can go on to patreon.com/starlores and support us there. And you get access to all the bonus episodes and add free episodes as well for the night tiers. Also, you can support us on Bitcoin or PayPal. And if you cannot support us monetarily, not a problem at all. But please, please, please go give the show a rating, and a review. That really helps us wherever you listen to podcasts. Or share the show with a friend. Also, we are on social media. All our social media links will be in the description of this episode. So go ahead and click there and follow us. If you want to reach out to us, make sure to email us at starlorespodcast@gmail.com and reach out to us. And also, I wanted to give a quick little reminder to everyone. If you haven't yet, go check out my new podcast, Principalities and Powers, with my brother, Skylar. It's a fun one. And even if you're not into that topic of conspiracy, paranormal, the occult, go and give us a rating review anyway. Do it for me. Okay?
Make it a conspiracy to rate and review podcasts you haven't heard.
Yeah, exactly. But nonetheless, go check it out. Having a lot of fun with that one, and but still having fun with this one too. Having fun talking about the Cuy'val Dar and all the trainers, the people who I would say continued the Mandalorian legacy into the Clone Wars.
That is certainly a point of I wouldn't say contention, but an interesting aspect to them. We'll get into in a second here. So we just kind of went over our laundry list of named characters. Some have more information than others. Some were like really fleshed out characters, main characters, and some spin-off material. And other characters were just a name drop and then had their backstories filled in through like a magazine entry or something like that, or a toy launch. Mm-hmm. So you get like a whole range of, and obviously we don't have all 75 Mandalorians or 25 non-Mandalorians named. And we have almost any, I don't think, of the non-Mandalorians named. Just one. Yeah. Which I that's one thing I do kind of lament. I wish there was more, especially with Star Wars, where every single background character has a name and backstory. It would have been nice to have like a full list. Flip side to that, maybe there's some room for some fan fiction. If you want to insert your Mandalorian cosplay into one of the Cuy'val Dar, there's definitely room for it. I'm a little 50-50 on like, it would have been nice to have more information on all of them, but at the same time, I do like a little bit of mystery and a little bit of flexibility in my narratives.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, I almost wish they just focused on like 10 or 12 and really fleshed them out, and then just left very ambiguous characters, maybe even unnamed characters who filled out the
rest
remainder.
Of the roster.
Yeah. And then, you can play around. Maybe there's they could bring in a RPG or something, and you can
make your own.
Make your own adventure kind of thing.
Yeah.
But be that as it may, there's still some cool, interesting bits of lore.
Yeah,
buried deep in the Cuy'val Dar.
Yeah. And on that note, Jordan, which would you say is your favorite?
It's hard to choose. The one I kind of liked, and I wasn't totally. I think he was just part of a toy launch, but I do kind of like his aesthetic and lore, I guess, perhaps more as a launching pad, but it's Lat's Ward.
Okay.
And what we do know about him, he centered his life around warfare, military strategy, that kind of thing. And it kind of, the lore around him makes him sound like he is really into military strategy and power games, which I like. I've kind of been on a game theory kick.
Okay.
If anyone follows the sociological, psychological concept of game theory and how, power actually works, like power dynamics between people. Very fascinating stuff, but a guy like Lat's Ward, I feel like he would be a very good game theorist.
You're reading a lot into there.
I know, but that's why I like that he's not super
fleshed out
because I can read into it what I want.
Yeah, and as for appearance, he does look pretty cool. He's got
he is awesome. Yeah,
a yellow green color scheme, Boba Fett style, kind of beat up armor with a mythosar.
Yeah, right on the chest.
Skull right on the chest. Yeah, it's a pretty cool design.
Yeah.
A lot of these toys were just reconfigured Jango or Boba Fett figures.
Yeah.
Which is kind of funny. And yeah, a good chunk of these did come out as a toy launch.
Yeah.
Which is kind of also kind of funny.
It is funny. Yeah.
Yeah, I got to say for me, and two of the kind of more fleshed out characters, definitely. I like the tension between Walon Vau and Kal Skirata.
Yeah.
You kind of have two sides of the same coin where they both kind of want what's best for their clones, but they go about it in completely opposite ways. And yeah, we'll get into it a little bit more deeply, but kind of their training philosophies are totally opposite. So Walon Vau is a lot more brutal, and he comes off as very cold and almost you feel like he hates his clones. But what he's doing, he's trying to toughen them up, and he's trying to expose them to the cruel realities of the world, of the galaxy that he's experienced. And he's like, no, I'm trying to make you survivors. He wants them to survive real combat. And then the flip side to that is Kal Skirata, who takes on a very paternal instinct over these clones, and he raises them a lot more gently, not without obviously the hard lessons of soldiering, but he comes at it from a completely opposite perspective. And through the text, Walon Vau, as cruel as his methods seem, even to the point that one of his own clone trainees despises him. It worked. Statistically, the numbers of clone casualties that his troopers had were far less than all the others. So those early brutal lessons did teach them to be survivors. Did it do lasting psychological damage? Probably. But I mean, we are talking about a whole army of children being raised for combat. So I think the psychological casualties are going to be just part of the equation at that point. Dred Priest is another one I kind of want to shout out. I have a love-hate relationship with him too. He takes Walon Vau's methodology and just goes to the utter extreme with it, to the point of almost just an overtly cruel, and genuinely doesn't care about the well-being of the clones anymore. What he wants is just the strongest and the fittest, and if you're weak, you die. To the point he's got death fight clubs going on. Now, there's lots of warrior cultures and or mythologies where fighting circles, even the Mandalorians themselves practice fighting circles, right?
Yeah.
Which, it teaches you to fight, it teaches you real combat, but to the point that his trainees are actually killing each other is a whole other level of brutality that I just can't get behind. But it is interesting to show that dark underside to.
Yeah. Just a quote from him here too, that for posterity here. He says, quote, in the strong survive, the weak die. That's the way the galaxy works. The day we forget that, we become everyone's lackey.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's sort of that's the flavor that you're going to get from a guy like Dred Priest.
Very Ordo quote.
Yeah.
Old school Mandalorian. Ordo from Knights of the Old Republic.
Yeah.
Coded. Yeah.
But there is I kind of understand that from the Mandalorian perspective. If you're struggling to keep your culture alive, and surviving, and you have very little to work with, you kind of you get into total survival mode, you know, and you I think it just shapes your entire worldview, and that's kind of how you see. things.
It's just a very brutal, natural kind of way of living. Law of the jungle, right? Like, go out in nature and see that is how the world ultimately functions without higher.
It is interesting. I'll go back to Skirata to juxtapose again to this sort of attitude, because he himself, interesting, he later becomes a advocate for clones, or an clone activist, like clones rights activist.
I wouldn't go as far as say that. He cares about them as children and as legacies, Mandalorian legacies, as inheritance.
Yes.
Which Mandalorian culture does, they have this whole adoption culture, right? So
yeah, but it is, and he himself is adopted, yes, but it is far more paternal.
Yes.
I would say than what you get kind of out of the other guys.
Any of the other guys, he is the most paternal. And again, there is an argument to be made for gentleness as the other side of firmness, right? Like, both are required to make good, strong soldiers that are capable, but also have something more to fight for than just brutalism and survival, right? Like, they can have higher ideals, and protecting family, protecting their heritage, protecting their culture all become also elements of their upbringing as well, not just the world is brutal and you have to be the most brutal.
Yeah, I do think just even going over these guys, it is sort of like an interesting sort of thought experiment about like the psychology of even leadership, and how do you make great people. And I think there is something to be said that just pure brutality and trauma maybe isn't necessarily always the best way to go about it. You want to build rapport, right, between the master and the student.
Yeah.
And you want to build buy-in between the master and the student. But then it's always a delicate dance, because you don't want them to feel like they're your peer, right?
Yeah. Or too soft or too coddled and not able to achieve the goal of like existing or life or what have you, whatever that goal might be. Like, if you come at them too gently with no discipline, these are going to be soldiers regardless, and there will be brutal situations that they're going to exist in, and you don't prepare. You're also equally at failure if you don't prepare them for that reality, right?
Yeah.
So, 100%. Well, it doesn't matter now because Disney nuked all the Cuy'val Dar. So,
but we could still have fun with them.
Yes, absolutely.
And buy their figures. Maybe they're $1,000 or something on eBay.
I don't know about that. Or you can make your own, just repaint a Boba Fett, just like the officials ones did. But yeah, even though they did nuke the Cuy'val Dar, this happens a lot.
Is there some Disney parallel to the Cuy'val Dar?
That's what I'm about to bring up. Yeah, they're not as explicit. So I mentioned in the last episode, Brix and I forget the other guy's name. Starts with an E. L.
Mm-hmm.
Ellis. They kind of are at least shown on screen to kind of fill that vacuum. Again, I mentioned even in the last episode, they're not Mandalorians explicitly. They are not Cuy'val Dar explicitly. They aren't at this point the Clone Wars is already in full swing, so they're just bounty hunters that were hired by the Republic to help train more clones, whatever that means, right? But the concept of Cuy'val Dar gone. That being said, Disney does this a lot of times, and I don't know if it's just a coincidence or it's someone who knows a little bit about the old lore and they just kind of lift the things that they like and kind of cobble it together and make it their own. Again, Filoni is notorious for doing this kind of thing. But the character Fen Reau, he's a Mandalorian protector that appears in the Rebels series. And Filoni claims that he chose the name Glenn Reau because Chris Glenn was a Lucasfilm concept artist and Brad Reau was a director for that episode. But oddly enough, Fen Shayasa is also a Mandalorian protector during the Clone Wars. And then there's also Isabet Reau, who we mentioned in this episode. And then also there's a little bit of that like paralleling between Dred Dred Priest and Isabet Reau. And then there are two other Mandalorian characters that are kind of a duo couple in the Disneyverse, Rook Cast and I forget which Vizsla it is. There's a couple of Vizslas in the Disney canon. But anyways, Cast and Vizsla are also this like male-female duo, like Death Watch.
Okay.
Coded. Well, in that case, explicitly Death Watch. And then even in the old canon, Death Watch as well. So you keep seeing these elements kind of pop up. And I don't know that they're totally uncorrelated.
Yeah.
I don't have proof of this, but...
So sometimes though, I wonder how much the writers of the new stuff are actually familiar with the old stuff.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, are they lifting stuff and cobbling it together to make it their own?
Yeah, or is it just a natural? Is it just kind of a natural place you go? Like you think Mandalorians,
yeah,
Mandalorian trainers who are going to pass on the culture, blah blah blah. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. Kind of always like I see these parallels and I'm like, I don't know if they're intentional. I don't know if they're coincidental, but it definitely raises my interest.
Right. Fair enough.
Yeah, whether or not they're complete ripoffs and they're like, we're just going to scrap the old stuff, give it a new coat of paint and pretend that it's ours.
Yeah.
Or, yeah, if it has deeper meaning. The Cuy'val Dar had a big role in kind of the idea that the clones would develop personalities and things. And there's a bit of a contrast, I think, pre and post. Not sure if it's really Republic Commando that set off this trend. But you have the image of the clone trooper who's borderline droid themselves. They're very like cold. They don't talk unless spoken to. Very like robotic. Good examples of this are during the Clone Wars, Gennady Tartakovsky series. If you look at the clones in there, they just doing their thing. Don't have any kind of personality behind them. They're all the same. And that's, of course, like the theme of clones is that they're all the same, right? The movies, arguably, they more or less kind of feel that way. You don't get a lot of clone time with them, but on the scale of personality, they all look pretty well the same. Yeah. Other than the Legion colors in Episode 3, where they kind of like personalize, but that could be, you could argue, is like organizational or mission based. Yeah. Now, the trend towards like individualist clones. You see elements of it start in the Republic series, and I don't know which came first, if it was the Republic series or if it was the Clone Commandos books. But this kind of like contrast, you have an ARC trooper by the name, and we'll get into a lot more deep stuff about clones with like ARC troopers and commandos. But Alpha 17, there's this kind of like dynamic of clones as just being numbers and clones developing personalities. And then you take it all the way to the other extreme, and the Dave Filoni Clone Wars series, where clones like go so far as to like get custom tattoos and custom haircuts and color their hair different, and each one has like personalized armor. And I understand from a character development perspective, you kind of need to do that to like on screen. It's hard to tell when character A and character B look exactly the same and have the same voice to give you something to work with to differentiate them. But I've always been fascinated by that like clone trooper personality spectrum. And there's also like the same to be said for like as a super soldier trope, you have like kind of the faceless soldier like Master Chief, or like the Spartans more broadly, right? They're just like a faceplate, their armor. They only spoke like they're very soldierly. They only speak when spoken to. And then you kind of explore their inner thoughts. Like, do they have inner thoughts? Who are they as people and characters? I don't know if you ever watched, there's a movie that came out in 1998 called Soldier.
I did watch that. Yeah.
I love that movie.
Yeah. It's like a super soldier film.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah. That, and
I vaguely remember it.
I think there's a lot of sci-fi tropes that actually come from it, especially when it comes to Halo.
Okay.
Is my personal theory. And it's
was Soldier like maybe inspired by some other science fiction book or something?
Tied into, I think, the Blade Runner universe, oddly enough. Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Odd. Okay.
I have to double check that, but it's tied into another film series. It's very like, it's just like very like hints, like clues in the movie. There's nothing explicitly said.
Yeah.
But again, that movie has like explores the whole concept of a soldier just being almost this like automaton versus developing a personality and, you know, a cause for fighting and blah, blah, blah. Anyways, all that to say is that these Cuy'val Dar at one point were a big influence on these clone troopers and were kind of a source for that contrast of developing a personality and a culture and something outside of being born and bred in this like very strict, soulless, whitewashed environment like Kamino. And I've always kind of liked that contrast. I wish there was more done to parallel them. Not to get too crazy here, I collect the Star Wars Legion miniatures, and I'm painting up 2 legions, custom legions, one that holds more to the clinical soldier non-personality type, and then another legion that has like a lot more independence. And I think like the legions themselves obviously would have that variation. You could have everything from like clones who never bought into this whole personality thing and carried on as kind of like their name and number, and then to the other extreme of like clones that have embraced a sense of identity outside of being just a clone.
Yeah.
But to me, it was always just kind of like a very cool contrast and like thing to explore, and things that people can explore about themselves, about their identity, how they feel about like is their job, their identity, and things like that. So there's some more nuance and depth to that conversation that people could reflect on. But.
Yeah, there's always all sorts of allegories with in these science fiction stories. You know, you think of something like the Borg in Star Trek, right? They're literally called drones. It is the individual Borg is just called a drone, and it's a hive mind. And there's all sorts of like, it draws on all sorts of social anxiety that we ourselves have in real life. You know, like the idea that you're just a cog in a machine. You're just told what to do. You don't have any sort of higher purpose other than serving the hive.
Yeah.
And I think maybe there's a little bit of that in sort of the clones, and Filoni tries to pull them out of that a little bit and to sort of release the shackles of of the collectivism of being a clone.
Yeah, and he does touch. There are some episodes that come to mind where that really comes to the front, and I just wish that was a bigger angle across all the Star Wars media, and an angle that they could embrace both sides of it and really contrast the two strict following order side and the individual human being side of the clones. And then that could also be paralleled against like the fact that they're fighting literal robots, and like what does that mean?
Yeah,
right.
True. It is odd. The real robots in Star Wars seem to have more individuality. They seem to be like the most quirky characters throughout most Star Wars.
And they do kind of do that with the battle droids, which ends up in the bad direction, where you're like, you know what, just make them mindless automatons. I don't need them like panicking and being little like jokesters and stuff. That's not.
I do kind of, this is something I do appreciate about Star Wars, I think I've said this before, just how it depicts droids and androids and artificial intelligence. It's a little different than kind of what you'd expect. I usually think something like Ex Machina or something like that, right? Like just how droids or any kind of artificial intelligence is depicted as it's scary, unknown. It could take over the world. It could kill all the humans. And they're just totally not that way. Yeah. Even among the droid army, it's more of a rebel group that's trying to uprise against the
Empire.
Yeah. Well, the Republic.
Oh, whatever the ruling power is.
But it at the end of the day, it's just a blip on the screen of galactic history, right? Yeah. So, it is. I do appreciate just how they depict it. But no droid is superior to Gotho. Or is it G0T0? I don't know.
GOTO.
Yeah.
I call him GOTO, which is
oh, really? I always
hybrid of both. Yeah.
Anyways, back to clones.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Just kind of one last point. Tying back with the whole Mandalorian culture and things, and this whole like contrast too between like Disney's version of it having abolished the idea of the Cuy'val Dar, it really erodes like any kind of Mandalorian identity, and that did the same thing directly with Boba Fett and Jango Fett.
Yeah.
But in the context of the clones, even things that start to kind of lose their meaning, I guess you could say. One thing comes to mind immediately is Captain Rex, who is kind of this like Alpha 17 parallel. Same thing. Just Filoni.
He's probably the most prominent clone, is he not?
Yeah,
Rex,
current fandom. But he's very much like a lifted, don't like copy my homework, but change it a little bit so they don't know you copied it kind of meme of Captain Rex. Of Alpha 17.
Okay.
Who was supposed to be that Rex figure, but they actually just dropped him because they had too many characters with A names. You had Anakin, R2, Ahsoka, and they didn't want Alpha 17, which bothers me on its for a whole other set of purposes, because Alpha 17 was an absolutely fantastic character. But I digress. The idea of Jag eyes is very much a Mandalorian tradition. It's always been said to be a Mandalorian tradition, and it's this kind of unique decal that you'll see on clone troopers and Mandalorian helmets. It's like an honor that they get bestowed. And if you remove that Mandalorian influence over the clones by removing the Cuy'val Dar, it's kind of odd that someone like even Rex carries that tradition. Like in old lore, there were clone troopers that wore the Jag eyes, and that made sense if you knew the Mandalorian context of them adopting Mandalorian traditions because their trainers are Mandalorians. Whereas now, without that context, it's kind of an odd thing that they kind of break canon-wise just by making that minor change. Is there going to be like a back-ended explanation? Could they reintroduce the Cuy'val Dar or something similar, or claim that there were a couple of Mandalorian trainers in the mix here
I hope
and there?
not. Let's just keep it in our old Legends
universe.
Yeah.
There's a separation of the two universes that you kind of have to embrace. You can't obviously have both worlds coinciding because they absolutely contradict each other in so many ways. But just little things like that where so much thought and care was put into the old work, and just because you wanted to change a couple things and make it your own kind of loses a lot of that meaning and context.
Yeah. Cool. Well, remember everyone, don't forget to check us out on YouTube. Go subscribe to the show on YouTube, and please rate and review the show. That really helps us out. And follow us on social media. Reach out to us, starlordspodcast@gmail.com. We appreciate everyone. We will see you next time.